Sports are some of the oldest ways that we have entertained ourselves, how we push human achievements to the absolute limit and achieve glory that has never been seen before. So it only made sense that when video games came along that they would be recreations of what we consider to be the peak of entertainment at this point in our history. And even the first video game was just a recreation of tennis. But it wouldn't stop there. Baseball, football, golf, and so much more were all brought into the virtual world. But they were all missing something. What if you could play as a fat Italian plumber? The Mario Sports franchise is a renowned series that has seen many iterations almost every single Nintendo console. But what about these games makes them legendary? How did they evolve over time to become the games that we know and love today, and what would lead to their unfortunate fall in popularity in the more recent entries? Well, like always, we have to start at the very first sports game that Nintendo would make back on the Nintendo Entertainment System. These games didn't even include Mario as a playable character at first, but we would see riveting entries like tennis, baseball, and of course, my personal favorite, golf. Okay, I get it, they weren't the most riveting games at the time, but you know what? Wait, is that Mario? Okay, so technically the most early Mario sports game was actually the golf games on the Nintendo Entertainment System. While not outright saying that this was Mario, you can basically assume this was Mario. I mean, if this isn't Mario Nintendo, I mean, it must be his drunk uncle SpaghettiOs or something. Like, I don't know. But out of all of the sports games on the Nintendo Entertainment System, this one would actually receive a sequel. And the sequel would actually feature Mario branding all over it. Gameplay-wise, though, it was more or less just a spiritual successor to the last game, just with the more Mario-style graphics and, you know, some little quality of life changes that they made from the previous iteration. Except now you could actually hit your ball down into the weeds and the rough in this game. I mean, check this out. God damn it! Okay, but the point of all this is that these games were all still roughly one-to-one recreations of every sport that we'd already known. And at the end of the day, NES Tennis was still tennis, NES Baseball was still baseball, and NES Golf was still golf. However, this would not be the end of the Mario Sports franchise by any means, and in fact, I think something awoken within the game devs at Nintendo between starting to include Mario in the branding and the different players of these games, and also jumping into the third dimension with the Nintendo 64. Because on the Nintendo 64, we would see the birth of a Mario Sports revolution. The Nintendo 64 ushered in a 3D era of gaming that has never been seen before, and thankfully never been seen since. With your typical classics like Mario 64, Donkey Kong 64, Mario Kart 64, I think you get the point. The number 64 has to be in the title somewhere, or Miyamoto will come to your house and kill you himself. But this actually also included these sports games like Mario Golf. And let me tell you, this game was absolutely revolutionary. And I know I've used that word a bunch, but I don't mean it lightly here. This game would be the blueprint for three-dimensional sports games, especially within golf. It was better looking and had tighter controls than, you know, even Tiger Woods' PGA 2004. But of course, it does look like it has aged like milk over time. It still just has those really core mechanics built into it and its soul. Like the 3-button tab meter mechanic that you would see in most golf games like Hot Shots Golf and other golf games that are popular at this time, where you tap the button once to start the meter, you tap it a second time for the power, and you tap it a third time for the amount of accuracy that you put on the ball. It's honestly kind of ingenious, and it's a great way to replicate the different complex mechanics that you see in real world golf. Additionally, we would see a lot of like course obstacles and stuff take a way bigger factor into the game, things that they really couldn't replicate in the two-dimensional games. Plus, there is a wider range of characters for you to play as, including some fan favorites like Charlie and Plum.
Here we go.
But at the end of the day, for a Nintendo 64 game, this game is fantastic. It looked relatively good, it was easy to pick up, and it was easy to understand. And with Mario Golf being so successful in the Nintendo 64, it only makes sense that they would bring other iterations of sports games to the Nintendo 64 as well. Like Mario Tennis is still something that people praise to this day, and playing it on NSO, it feels just absolutely amazing. Like Mario Golf, it has a large cast of characters for you to play as, all with their own unique abilities and power-ups and different methods of play. There is a surprising amount of depth with this game in terms of how you can control the ball, having different button combinations for you to do drop shots, lobs, top spins, and everything in between. You would also see a really fun and robust tournament mode, and the gameplay is surprisingly tight and fast-paced. Wait, can we zoom in on this? What the f*** is that? I mean, who they got judging his matches? At first we had Uncle Spaghettio, and now we have Merlin judging the tennis games? What's going on here, Nintendo? Who is this guy, and why have we not gotten more merchandise of him? And both of these sports games were a smash hit, especially for the time. Some could even argue even more than Madden at the time, but you know, that success for Madden would come later. Because these games would almost perfect the sports that they were trying to replicate, and have a little bit of their own charm and spin on it, especially when you're playing as a giant, turtle that breathes fire and lizards and also an Italian. Those are some pretty mythical creatures, am I right? But what if we could get extremely realistic? Like, I'm talking like you feel like you're in the game playing this game of tennis. What if we could get in there and it looks like you yourself are playing against Mario? Well, do I have a little device to introduce you all to called the Virtual Boy. So, for those of you who don't know, the Virtual Boy was Nintendo's attempt at VR before they attempted VR. And this device was basically motion sickness with a price tag. I mean, I do wish I could experience personally what the Virtual Boy was like without having to fight a million Nintendo collectors, even for the more modern day version of it that you can find on the Switch too. But from what I hear, it's horrible. This thing sucks. I mean, this gameplay does not look riveting or fun in any degree, and it looks like a, kind of funsy tech demo at best. So it became obvious that, getting too immersive into the sport just isn't a successful formula. So where does the Mario Sports franchise go from here? Obviously, having those tight mechanics and core gameplay that feel just exactly like the sport are very successful. But how do they innovate from here? Well, instead of becoming more realistic, what if they got less realistic? The early 2000s were actually the golden era of sports games, like in general, not just Nintendo. Like, you would start to see the really major brands come up at this time, like Madden and NBA 2K and also FIFA, not to mention again Tiger Woods' 2004 tour. But I'm sure that you get that the list goes on, that anybody and everybody was making a realistic and one-to-one direct comparison of real life sports in video games, which was fantastic and great. There was a ton of competition and we saw a lot of great games for sports games come out of this time. But back to Nintendo, as we said, they already had done this. They had already perfected this formula, but now they were going to try to take it a step further. And I mean, I'm not talking about the fact that their console looked like a school lunchbox, but it's actually the games that were on this little lunchbox that would stand out even more out from the crowd of the other sports games. Okay, so for whatever reason, Nintendo loves tennis. They love seeing Mario and the whole gang play a bunch of different tennis games, because this would be the second entry on any console. But this one really stood out. I mean, you would see each character have their own individual special attack and power-up that they could use while they played this game, but not to mention that they would continue the tight and core mechanics from the previous games on the Nintendo 64, all being accompanied by stunning visuals, a really in-depth story mode, and also a bunch of different mini-games. Not to mention some really fun and cool personalities from each of the different characters that you would play as within this game. I mean, like, shut up, Luigi, it's enough, we get it, you lost. But then again, if my brother decided to rub on my shoe like this after I had won an entire tournament, I think I would also bitch about it for a week. But this concept of adding these wacky power-ups and mechanics would not stop at Mario Tennis, but of course it would bring it to Mario Golf as well, and Mario Golf Toadstool Tour. Toadstool Tour would feature a bunch of amazing characters just like the other entries, but then you would also have all these really wacky and kind of cool courses that you would be able to play throughout the game, while continuing the tight core golf mechanics that you had seen in the Mario Golf 64 edition. I think this is definitely my favorite golf game out of all of the different Mario Golf games that are available on Nintendo consoles, and I highly recommend you do check it out if you can. So while these games are awesome and successful, does Mario only do golf and tennis? Like, are there any other sports that Mario might dabble into? Well, with the success of these games and the sports games prior to them, it only makes sense that Nintendo would expand into different types of sports as well to make games about. And they would actually expand the genre into 2 different sports. One of those being, of course, Mario Baseball. Mario Baseball is a fantastic game, keeping the tight core mechanics that we know and love from most baseball games, while continuing to expand on the base sport with a ton of different concepts. Concepts like adding individual power-ups for each player, both at bat and while pitching, having different item systems within the different fields, having a variety of different fields for you to play on, and finally, the kind of cherry on top of this game is that they include a very in-depth chemistry system. Almost every single player and character in this roster all has an individual unique value that they have in the chemistry that they have with the different players on their team. So basically, if you make a team of like half of them are good guys from the franchise and half of them are bad guys, they're gonna butt heads and they're actually gonna get tired more frequently than if you probably put an entire team of good guys together on the franchise. Like, this game has such incredible depth to it that there's a league of people who still play it today and they regularly compete against each other. And with the first game being so successful, it only makes sense that they would continue this franchise onto the Nintendo Wii, with this entry being called Mario Sluggers. Now, on paper, I do think that this game is just as good as Mario Baseball on the GameCube, but the motion controls can kind of remove some of the precision and accuracy that you would have while playing these games. But I do agree that, being able to swing that bat is just such a great feeling. I mean, it's something that they already replicated almost to perfection in Wii Sports, so why not bring it to the Mario franchise? But like its previous entry, it would continue to iterate on these power-ups and different mechanics that we saw in the first entry. At the end of the day, Mario Baseball holds a special place in my heart because in middle school, I would always come home at the end of the day and play this with my friend who was ironically also named Austin, and we would both just, play this thing for hours. It got me through a lot of really tough days. But all of that being said, I did say that there was 2 different sports that Nintendo would expand the Mario Sports franchise into. I already talked about baseball, so what was the last sport that they decided to go into? Well, let me just say that this is probably the greatest game in the Mario Sports genre in general. It is a series so legendary that it genuinely changed my brain chemistry. So let me introduce you to the Mario Strikers series. Mario Strikers is Mario's take on soccer, and it's fucking awesome. I'm not a big soccer person in real life myself, but this game would iterate on soccer games in the same way that the baseball and golf and tennis games would have, by including power-ups and unique character rosters, and having really cool field locations that just make for really intense and fun settings. But the piece de resistance that made this game so special is it has this almost unhinged element to it. When you tackle people in this game, you're actually just fucking destroying them. When it feels like you do some damage in this game, when you either throw a bomb down or you freeze people or anything of the sort, it feels like you're actually crushing every individual bone in their body that person has, and you're flying them off the field if you really could have. None of this would be even as fun as it is if the game didn't have tight core mechanics, which it totally does. The different charging mechanics, the way you can control the ball after you've already made a shot, the different ways you can pass it back and forth and have all these different cool tricks with them. It is impressively complex and in-depth for a silly Mario game. I mean, it is just absolutely so fun, and I just can't think of any other game that can top this experience. With the sole exception of Mario Strikers Charged, of course. Moving into the Wii era, Mario Strikers Charged did everything right that the first game did, and then some. It would allow you to change individual members of your roster instead of having 3 of the same type of characters, so it made for really complex teams that you could build. Like, the team build I would always go for was Mario at the front, followed by Toad, who had insane maneuverability and would kick this giant fireball goal at the goalie, followed by Koopa, who had insane maneuverability as well and the dodging mechanics. We would finish up the roster with Hammer Bro, who could literally throw a hammer down below him, stun their character that he hit for almost like a minute, it felt like, and then if you got to use his special charge kick, it would actually knock the goalie out, and they couldn't do anything about it, basically. And some would argue that that's not even the most broken character in the entire game. There's characters like Monty Mole and Boo that are just straight up getting up behind the goalie and throwing the ball into the net. It's just incredible how many individual abilities they gave every single character in this roster, and it is just so fun. But the only reason I see people even complain complain about this game and why it doesn't quite live up to the GameCube version is because, yes, again, the motion controls. Which, to be fair, in this game only dictate your tackling ability, but for a game that is fast-paced and requires a lot of precision, it kind of does come down to the milliseconds and the reaction time. This is one of the first competitive games that you could play online on the Wii, so motion control mechanics weren't exactly precise, especially with the ping Wi-Fi delay. I mean, have you ever played Mario Strikers Charge on Wi-Fi network with your turn on the line, having to give the control up to your brother if you end up losing the match? I remember playing this game, especially against Waluigi mains, who were just the most disrespectful people in the world in that game, and I could just see the puzzle pieces coming together and falling down, just like they do in Blue Lock, as I scored that final goal. And I told my brother to suck it so I could get another turn and play another person on the Wi-Fi network. That or we would just beat the shit out of each other after the fact. All that being said, it is just obvious that the GameCube and Wii eras of the Mario Sports games were just such a perfect golden era of Mario Sports gaming. We would see classics come to the modern era and almost be perfected, while at the same time introducing brand new modern staples. But I do have to tell you that I actually lied. There wasn't just 2 games that they actually expanded the Mario Sports franchise into. In fact, that number isn't even really close. They would actually make one game that was so encapsulating of most modern sports that you can find in a court, and they would cram all of it into one game called Mario Sports Mix. So it was Valentine's Day in like 2011 or whenever the hell this game came out, and I do remember specifically not getting any like roses or doing any of the Valentine's Day stuff that they normally did at schools that day. And so when I came home from school, I was kind of feeling down on myself, only to come home and find that we had a brand new game sitting next to our Nintendo Wii, which was, of course, Mario Sports Mix. My little brother and I decided to boot this game up, and we would play so many of the different games, like hockey and the volleyball, and so many others, but the one that stood out to me the most was definitely the dodgeball. All of these games, again, having very tight and awesome mechanics while including their own different and special abilities from each individual character. This game is just going to be forever etched into my mind just because of the time that it fell into my lap. It was just so great, and I really can't thank my mom enough more for getting me that game at the time. But this game was actually the first game to awaken me into the Mario Sports genre in general. Like, all the games I had previously mentioned weren't games that I had played until after I played this one. So you could even argue that it's single-handedly responsible for me, being the epic Mario gamer that I am today, right? But my personal history of this game aside, this game would have one of the most insane story modes of any sports game and almost any game ever. When you play through the story mode of this game, it begins with the Mushroom Kingdom and a giant meteor falling from the sky. Then inside of this meteor has a bunch of crystals with the different sports that you can play in this game within it. There are then tournaments set up for each category of the sports, all of which include volleyball, basketball, hockey, and dodgeball. You then repeat this process throughout the Mushroom, Flower, and Star Cup, but at the end of the Star Cup, you are actually encountered by a character named Ninja, who is in a disguise as Princess Peach, where they steal the trophy at the end and jump into a starship. You then follow them and play them in a various sport to get the starship and trophy back. You then encounter Ninja's teammates, which are the Final Fantasy-esque team, one of which being the White Mage, which I need more of the White Mage to be included in future games, by the way, Nintendo. And at the end of this battle, you receive the last crystal, but when all the crystals combine, they actually turn into a dark crystal, which makes the player encounter the Behemoth boss, which again is a creature from the Final Fantasy series. One incredible boss fight later, and then you have finally beaten Mario Sports Mix. And it just feels like this was the most ambitious game Nintendo had ever made in the Mario Sports franchise in general. But as I say that, I just remembered that I think I lied to you again. Not only was this not the end of Nintendo expanding into different sports franchises, this one wasn't even the most ambitious one. And some could even argue not even the weirdest. And yes, I'm saying this next game is weirder than the NBA crossover that they did back in the day. Nintendo would actually end up sitting down and ask themselves, how can we get Italians more better represented at the Olympics? And the only logical answer to that question, of course, is just sitting in there with the blue hedgehog. Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games would be a Mario Sports series that would start during the 2008 Beijing Olympics, and this game was met with smashing success. Even the versions of it on the DS were a banger of a game. And this game would include all the charm of the Mario sports games that we had seen in the past, and having replicated all the major sports that you could find in the Olympics, while also including an amazing cast and roster of all the Mario characters, and including all of the different Sonic ones, even some really niche characters like Silver. The way that the different sports were replicated within this game felt tight and perfect, and the smashing success of this game would actually lead to numerous sequels into the future, even including Winter Olympic versions. And the Winter Olympic versions also stand up on their own two legs very well, because not only do they replicate the games very well, but they also have these really cool, like, wonder unique games that are weird versions of the regular Winter Olympics, but they have their cool new spin and different power-ups about them. And not to mention the Mario and Sonic Winter Games story mode that was on the Nintendo DS specifically. I mean, this story mode probably took like 20 hours to play. It was just incredible, and it featured the entire cast and different bosses and all the games that you would see within a Winter Olympics. However, not all good things can last, unfortunately, and these games would actually be the start of the fall into Mario Sports' mediocrity, with later entries just feeling like more of the same and becoming just really not as fun as the old ones, or not having the charm and the soul that they had. And unfortunately, this mediocrity wouldn't end with the Mario and Sonic franchise, and it would actually go on to affect some of the main title sports games. So included in this era of mediocrity would actually start with Mario Sports Superstars in the Nintendo 3DS. This game was kind of meant to be a spiritual successor to Mario Sports Mix, but just really missed the mark, which is also followed up by Mario Golf World Tour, which again just kept falling in that valley of mediocrity, where it wasn't exactly a bad golf game, it just didn't have that special sauce that the previous entries had. In a game that would seal the deal of the era of mediocrity and the complete fall off of the Mario Sports franchise, but has to go to Mario Tennis Ultra Smash. I know, the game that started it all actually is the one that seems to have ended it all. Not only was this game very mediocre, but its core mechanics and way that you play tennis just felt awful, and it felt like you just couldn't play once the other player had their special abilities and ways to kind of trip you up. And the main point of this being that all of these games were just bad, and it damaged the identity and branding of the Mario Sports genre for many years to come, and unfortunately into the Switch era as well. So to start this mid off, we have to talk about Mario Strikers Battle League, which again is just mid. It's not necessarily bad, it's definitely, not the strongest entry in the franchise by any means, but it does have some redeeming features in its tournament modes, but there just wasn't the unhingedness and special sauce that we had seen in prior entries, especially in Mario Strikers Charged. Then we have Mario Tennis Aces, which was definitely way better than Ultra Smash, but it still just lacked that, complexity and depth that was just, plus the Ultra Smash branding had tainted the formula so much, and this game came out basically like right after that game came out, that it was hard to really justify picking this game up, even if it was good enough. And then the last Mario Sports game that we saw on the Nintendo Switch was Mario Golf Super Rush. So the perfect way to describe how mediocre Mario Golf Super Rush is that there's this game called Super Battle Golf that exists now, which is basically like a better version of what that game was trying to sell us to be. Like in Super Battle Golf, you see all these different ways that you can trip each other up and really start to mess with each other, and it's super tight and fast, versus Mario Golf Super Rush, which just doesn't have the sauce. It's a little too tame. It needs to be more unhinged and faster and have different ways that you can mess up your opponent and ways for you to incentivize that other than reaching the hole first. The core idea is there, and it's definitely something that could have been really fun, but I just don't think that they executed it in the best way possible, and especially now that we have a perfect example of how it should have been done. It's just really sad to see how far the Mario Sports genre has fallen in its most recent entries, especially when not that long ago we had the most peak gameplay come from this series. But as much doom and gloom as there is currently, there is hope on the horizon. And of course it goes back to Nintendo's love sport, tennis. Mario Tennis Fever is like stupid fun. Like I can't justify the $70 price tag by any means. That's not what I'm here to do. But what I am here to do is to justify that love and care that we had seen in the golden era of Mario sports games, it's here. and it's back more than ever. Like, these different racket power-ups that they include in this game definitely are very disruptive to the gameplay, but not so much that it feels like you can't play the tennis game. Like, the tennis gameplay is there and it's tight and it's almost perfect, but the different rackets and combinations that you can do with the different characters and their power-ups and their stats, it's just incredible, and it makes for a really in-depth gameplay. Not to mention, of course, that there's also a story mode again featured in this game. Now, I know it's not very long, but it's still there, and it shows that they're listening. They're trying to make it better. I mean, I played this game on stream for a few hours, and I did not want to stop. It was so much fun. And the only reason I've stopped playing it since then is because games like Pokopia exist now. So all of this is to say that there's hope on the horizon for a renaissance of the Mario sports genre. I just really want to see that the same love and care that they put into Mario Tennis Fever gets put into other iterations of sports games like we had seen in the past. It's just super reassuring and very exciting, and I hope that Nintendo introduces us into the renaissance of the Mario sports era. And if you do introduce a new sports game, Nintendo, it better fucking be goddamn Mario Baseball, damn it. We've been waiting for that franchise forever.